Well, good morning. Welcome to the April 20th, 2021 Standing Policy Committee on Finance meeting. We're gathered today on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. I'm Scott Gillingham, City Councillor for St. James, joined today by my council colleagues, two of them on the screen, Councillor Orlico and Councillor Schreier. And here in the chamber with me is Councillor Rollins. Also joined today by members of our administration and our clerks as well. And so thank you for joining us today in this meeting. And Mr. Clerk, we'll start with, are there any delegations at all?
There are no delegations, Mr. Chair.
Okay, motion then to receive the previous minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Rollins, all in favor, aye. Opposed, carried, thank you. And we'll get right into our agenda here. We have 8 items on the agenda. And so we'll begin today with our first item, first report, our major capital projects reporting schedule. And I'll turn to our CFO and just let you introduce this. Thank you.
Sure.
Catherine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today we have the author of this report with us via Zoom, Manager of Capital Projects, Danny Tooth, will be joining us, and he'll speak to this report. So over to you, Danny.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. This is your regular monthly reporting schedule for major capital projects. No changes have been made since last month. And today you have 3 reports coming to you from the Water and Waste Department.
Okay, thank you. I think it's pretty straightforward. I don't think there's, as he says, there's no real changes. Any questions on the reporting schedule? Okay, Mr. Tooth, flawless as usual. Thank you. We'll entertain a motion then to receive this report.
So moved.
Moved, all in favor, aye. Opposed, carried. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, take care. Item number 2 is the SCADA report, the Water Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. As we often say, this is a long project over multiple years. And so we'll get the update on this item number 2.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. As Danny mentions, there's 3 administrative reports today on the agenda for capital projects. And today we have the Director of Water and Waste, Moira Gear, here to speak to this report on SCADA, along with Tim Shanks and Colin Javra, who are joining her remotely. Moira?
Good morning. Thank you, Catherine. Morning, Mr. Chair and Committee. Maybe what I'll do on the SCADA report is give an overview, and then if there's any questions, if that works for the committee. So this is the SCADA project, as Mr. Chair alluded to. It's a very long-term project. This is the reporting period ending December 31st, 2020. The project is on schedule. The project report notes that it's not on budget, and that was because we had a budget request last year because of the bid prices that had come in on some of the work. In the project, just overall with what's happening in the project right now, the design is ongoing. The part of the project was communications upgrades at the Taché Booster Station, as well as the water treatment plant. Those have been completed. And just in January of this year, we awarded a contract for the actual implementation of the SCADA now. And we did have a budget adjustment last year, but we've now had this contract come in below the pre-bid estimate, which is good news. The implementation piece, which will take us into 2024, which is the completion date, that's actually implementing the SCADA, doing all the commissioning, updating the power reliability at the stations and new PLCs. And what we're recommending in this report is that we don't come back again till Q2 22 as opposed to the quarterly reporting cycle, because we won't actually have anything to report on. The next milestone for us, which is the completing the SCADA upgrade, is Q3 2021. So we with the reporting schedule, and when that gets completed, we're recommending that we come back in 2022. Of course, if anything changed that would obligate us to come to committee, we would. But we're saying right now that we don't actually expect anything substantive to report on until that time, because of the long-term nature of this project. I guess just as another note, albeit the tender for the implementation came in under budget, we are not recommending right now that we reduce the budget because of the long-term nature and the age of the infrastructure. So we'll monitor that and see where we're at and relieve the budget if we think it's reasonable. But at this early juncture, we're not recommending we do that.
Okay, thank you. All right, any questions on this report? Just one quick question on it. The SCADA system, it's a monitoring system, but it's from the treatment plant through the distribution system. It doesn't monitor kind of water flows, does it, prior to, like from Shoal Lake to the treatment plant? Is it everything treatment plant and distribution, or is it a monitoring system that also includes kind of the Shoal Lake aqueduct?
The SCADA system is right from the lake.
Right from the lake all the way through.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we monitor the aqueduct as well.
Okay,
Yep.
with this system, okay,
Yep.
all right. Okay, motion then to receive this as information with the understanding that the next report will come back really a year from now.
So moved.
It's been moved by Councillor Rollins, all in favor, aye. Opposed, carried, thank you. Moving on then to the South End Sewage Treatment Plant Upgrade and Expansion Report.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, there's a written report from the administration in the posted materials. And again, Moira Gear, the Director of Water and Waste, will speak to this South End Water Pollution Control Center.
Okay,
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, so this, again, we're all in the same reporting period. It's as of December 31st, 2020. On the South End project, we're reaching the home stretch, but at this, as of this reporting period, unfortunately, we're reporting that we are not on schedule and we are not on budget. The reasons why we're not on schedule or on budget primarily is due to contractor performance and delays with the contractor on the fourth and final contract of the South End upgrade. And there is some impact from COVID and basically what we're saying on the schedule piece is, if you look at the report, the final commissioning was intended to happen in Q3 2021. We're working at what that schedule would be. We were also scheduled to be in compliance with the license as of December 31st, 2020, the date of this report. And our schedule now is that we will be in compliance by December 31st, 2021. So although we're highlighting that we're not on budget and we're not on schedule, we do expect the South End plant to be in full compliance for nutrient removal by the end of this year. So the delay that's happened, we're working with the contractor, very closely with the contractor and the entire team at the South End project to come up with what the new fully commissioned date will be. But we will be in compliance by the end of 2021 is the plan. On the budget side of it, we will be coming to the Water and Waste Committee that we report to next month, and we will be asking for a budget adjustment. We will be asking for $16.5 million as a budget adjustment to the South End. So the South End project right now, it's a $335 million budget. The ask that we will come with next month will take us up to roughly $351 million. It's within the range of the AAC class estimating, so it's not good, but it's not out of the realm. And really what part of it was when we awarded the contract for, we did in the report when we awarded contract for, which is a $180 million contract, we did indicate that we were carrying a very small contingency at the time. So that factors into it, but the cost that we'll be incurring in the budget ask that we will be coming forward with is for the construction management contract administration, some construction contingency to get us to the end. And then sort of a late breaking one, which we've seen in the media lately, is we've got an extra cost due to shipping containers and trying to get some parts that we need for the plant that have to come from Korea. And CCAN prices have skyrocketed. There was an article last week in the CBC, and it's not even, I mean, it's not really the Suez Canal thing, it's just the world generally, right? So it's like it's a global market condition that's suddenly affecting the project. So we're working actively on it. We are on the home stretch. We're into the final contract. We're into commissioning and tying in new parts of the plant, but we have had some issues with the contractor. We do have external legal counsel that we work with very closely, and you know, we're looking at all of the remedies that we have to recover some of these additional costs, and we continue to work on that, as well as work with the contractor and have weekly commissioning meetings and schedule meetings to make sure that we get to the finish line as soon as we can.
Okay. One question I have a few, but I'll ask one and then I'll turn to Councillor Schreier in a minute. You mentioned the remedies. You indicate that the primary reason for this budget increase is related to contractor performance. What kind of remedies are available and being pursued by the city to recoup, if any, some of this overage, if it's based not on the city side, but on contractor performance? What kind of remedies are we pursuing?
Well, we are applying all the provisions of the contract, and one of the things that we've been doing with the execution of this contract is assessing liquidated damages. So we have been assessing liquidated damages, which is which essentially is a provision where we don't pay them because they're creating costs for us. So that's part of what we've been doing. That's part of the appeals that have been coming forward as well, because we have been withholding liquidated damages. And it's also noted in the report, like it's probably over a year ago, where we proposed a dispute resolution process to try to resolve some of these matters. And we did not hear back from the contractor, but in the contract, there are provisions that once we get to substantial completion, then we can go to mediation. In the contract, it notes like we've received over 500 appeals from the contractor. The vast majority of those are related to liquidated damages and timing of payment. So we've yet to resolve any of those issues yet. So we have regular meetings with our legal counsel, and we have very rigorous project management, contract administration processes to protect the interests of Winnipeggers on this project. So we've been working with legal counsel for at least a year, maybe longer.
And the 16 million is, a lot of it's related to contract management, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, what's up, because of the schedule extension. So we need extra budget to pay for the contract administration, the construction management, adding some contingency to the construction costs because of the contingency was small to begin with. And we've seen, this whole shipping issue that's now upon us is going to create additional costs to get the materials to Winnipeg and potentially could cause schedule delays. So those are the four main components. Those will be detailed in a report to, I think we're at committee at May 9th next month. So we'll be coming forward to the Water and Waste Committee requesting a budget increase.
Okay, that was going to be my question, whether there was a breakdown for the 16.5 million, but you say that will be in the report that goes to Water and Waste?
That's
Okay,
correct.
so that will be publicly available then.
Yes, absolutely.
Councillor Schreier?
Thank you. So you're talking about 16 million in extra costs, unforeseen costs. Did you say 16 million or 30 something?
16.5 million, Councillor.
Okay, so that's like a 0.5% increase of the budget.
That's roughly a 5% increase.
5%. I'm sorry. I thought, what is the contract?
The budget right now for the South End project is 335 million.
Right.
And we're asking for we'll be asking next month for a 16.5 million budget adjustment. That would take us up to 351 million on an amended budget.
5% increase. At one point you said 180 million.
That's,
And,
that's the value of the fourth and final contract that we're working on.
okay. And you were talking about a few things, some things that we need. But we're not seeing this as the contractor. We're seeing this as what is our role here? We're not the contractor. What are we in this case?
We are the owner of the facility that that is being constructed. The city is the owner.
So the city's the owner. And when we talk about those things that we need, what are the contractor's obligations to these things which we say we need?
We've, Councillor Gillingham had just asked about what are some of the remedies and how will we try to recover some of those costs? And that's by the assessing liquidated damages on the contract, withholding payment to the contractor, as well as looking at other mediation opportunities that are within the contract provisions.
And you're talking about we are taking responsibility, financial responsibility for contract administration.
The city administers the contract and does the construction commissioning as well.
But you're saying that the cost, that looks like it's going to go up, the cost of the contract administration from the original estimate?
The cost is going up because the schedule has been extended. So we need we need extra budget because of the schedule extension.
So even though we are withholding payment and using financial terms like assessing liquidated damages, the budget's still going up by 5%?
That's correct. That's what that's what we need to get us to the finish line.
And we know this before. How much are we spending on legal fees? Or is it just part of the cost of having a legal department? Or are there specific legal costs involved?
No, we have a contract with an external legal counsel, and the contract value that we've awarded, which is in table 1, is $750,000. We have Duboff Edwards working as our legal counsel.
Pardon me?
We have a contract with an external legal counsel, and the contract value is $750,000.
Is that part of the 13 million?
We're not asking for extra money for legal. We're asking for extra money to finish the project.
Okay. So legal fees are not changing. They're still at $750,000 million.
Today they are, yes, absolutely. This is for the actual project delivery. The 16.5 million is for the project delivery, not for legal counsel.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions at all?
No,
I do have one other, just to confirm, table 4 in the report, of course, is the funding forecast. There's a portion of funding, the city bearing the lion's share of the cost for this project, retained earnings and external debt. Maybe it's in the report, I've just missed it. I don't recall. The 16.5 million, will that be funded through an increase to internal debt, or is that retained earnings? Because the assumption is that the province and the federal government will not be paying any of the 16.5, correct?
that's correct.
Okay.
The 16.5 million is likely going to come from retained earnings. But when we talk about the next report, I can indicate some of the things that we're going to be looking at as a result of what's coming on the north end as well.
Okay.
And with the rate, so.
I'm just wondering, you mentioned, the final question is related to, you mentioned the CCAN, and the increase in expenses there. I'm wondering, I mean, COVID continues. COVID is having, an impact on projects. You hear sometimes of, staff, contractor employees maybe having to self-isolate because they come from out of province or whatever the case may be. And I don't know if that's the case on this project. What I'm wondering is there, are you factoring that into your water and waste projects, kind of the the impact of COVID and just the world we're living in here.
We absolutely do. There's been, I mean, certainly the shipping issue for South End is COVID related. The impact on the actual project delivery for South End, just because the status we were at, I don't think we were as nearly as impacted. Just the way that we've been able to deliver the project. And I mean, a lot of the work does happen remotely, but COVID is not a significant factor in the contractor delays. Contractor delays are really contractor performance.
On this project, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, I think Councillor Rollins moved to receive the report as information because of course we don't approve the budget overage or increase if that's a water waste. Councillor Orlico, did you have a question or were you just voting in favor? Okay, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 4, the North End plan.
Great. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, there's a written administrative report in the posted committee materials. And again, the Director of Water and Waste, Moira Gear, will speak to this along with her staff, Tim Shanks and Colin Jabra. So Moira, over to you on the North End plant.
Thanks, Catherine. Okay, so again, we're December 31st, 2020. North End is another good news report. North End is not on budget or on schedule. The schedule, the reason why we're not on schedule, there's a couple of reasons for that. We did indicate it because of the passage of time, we did indicate to stay on the schedule for the headworks. We wanted to award the contract for the headworks by Q1 2021. That hasn't happened. We have not yet awarded a contract. That report will be forthcoming to Water and Waste Committee next month. The meeting is on May 7th. The other component of the North End project where we are experiencing delay is on the biosolids project, which is the second out of the gate for the North End. And we did have a report at council, maybe it was last month, as part of the application for the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program funding. The city is required to do a P3 analysis, and we are still working on that. So we have not had any approval yet on biosolids for funding, and so we've basically advised council last month, because council made the commitment, authorized the city to go spend 15 million on design, but we're not doing that right now because of this other analysis that we have to undertake. So those two things have put us behind on schedule. On the budget, the reason we're reporting that we're not on budget because of the results of the bid on the Headworks design build. So in the Headworks contract that we did, that we will be coming forward with next month to the Water and Waste Committee to recommend a preferred proponent, that the results of that bid process came in $65 million higher than the affordability limit that we had disclosed in the bid. So what we had done when we went through the process for the design build, we disclosed a budget threshold. Both of the bids that came in, we had two bidders, both were in excess of the affordability limit. And that's definitely a COVID impact. That's a global market condition. I can tell you about the procurement process that we've gone through on the Headworks DB. Was very rigorous, very professional, very, a lot of due diligence. We had a team of professionals, external legal counsel, fairness advisor, we had infrastructure advisors, et cetera, as part of the team. The affordability limit that we had disclosed in the bidding documents was based on a Class 3 estimate, which had been independently verified by 3 separate parties. So the number that we went out with the budget was the design engineer had that number. We had Hanscom, which is a construction estimator. We had them verify the number. And the city auditor also reported to EPC. They had Turner Townsend also do an independent review, and everybody said, "Yep, the number's good. The number's good." We had 3 independent reviews of that. But as it turns out, at the end of the process, the bids came in higher, and the bids came in higher. The experts the national, international experts that we had working with us on this. It's a global condition right now. It is definitely the global pandemic. It's the market is not willing to take on as much risk as they may have pre-COVID. There's a really low risk tolerance from the bidders. We only had 2 bidders, which in itself was unusual. And the supply and demand is quite skewed. So there's a lot more work than there are people, according to these experts. And you know what, that may be a trend we see continue with the trying to stimulate the economy through infrastructure projects. There's a glut of work, and we've seen that happen in this bid. So despite doing everything absolutely 100% spot on with what we should have done with a project this large, we've got a project that's come in, bid price is $65 million higher. The detail in that will come in the report to Water and Waste Committee next week. And the affordability threshold does allow us to say, we don't have to award it. That gives us the ability, but we can't not award it because Headworks is first out of the gate and we have to get the North End project going. So that's the detailed report that will come next month. It is a large increase, but on the overall budget, it's still within the AACE class range, and we will disclose that because the overall budget for the Headworks project is $408 million, and we're coming to ask for 65 next month when we recommend the preferred proponent. Another little complicating factor on it, or not a little complicating factor, is we're still awaiting approval on the ISEP funding. And we did disclose in the report to council last month that we won't award the contract until the funding is confirmed. And we have a bid that's going to expire in June. So we're really pushing, we disclose that we need funding approval by June 1st, like at the absolute latest, and that's even pushing it a bit. So with the interim CAO and myself, we keep pressuring to find out like where's the approval, and the Headworks application has gone to the feds. But we haven't heard back yet. So the clock is ticking on that as well. So that's a risk that exists right now.
So a few questions. So this will be a $65 million increase, taking it from 408 to 473 million on this.
Correct.
You indicate that you're obviously, we don't have the ISEP application approved yet, and so the federal provincial governments, even though they've indicated verbalized their support, that ISEP application has not been approved. Is there a risk that if it's not approved, let's say by June 1st, when your bid kind of expires, is there a risk that if it goes, let's say, another 6 months and is not approved till the end of 2021, is there a risk that the cost will increase yet again and you'll need more? We'll be looking at more than $65 million increase?
There would be a potential for sure. I mean, there's also clauses in the contract that, I mean, I don't think it would happen, but I mean, if we didn't meet the milestone dates in the contract, the contractor would have the right to walk away. And then there's break fees that the city would have to pay, which is also disclosed. I think we disclosed that in the last report. Like we'd have to pay each party $1 million and they could walk if we don't award anything by the time the bid expires. I'm hopeful that, we're coming forward to recommend a preferred proponent. We've in good faith we're making that commitment. So hopefully, but I think everybody's quite nervous about when that approval will come in, because we're not going to go award that. If we award it prior to the approval, then it's all on city ratepayers' dime, right?
If for water and waste, it's kind of a market issue right now. Like if the federal government and other governments are, dumping a bunch of stimulus money into the environment, right? So if there's a lot of work available for contractors, then obviously the prices reflect that as well. I guess not only the first question would be for water and waste, and then I guess Catherine, CFO, is that something we look at? Will that impact everything from? I'll start with you, Catherine. Will that impact our roads budgets? Will that impact building budgets? Will that impact everything? And are we preparing for that? Are we kind of factoring that if that's a new reality, are we factoring that into our cost estimates?
I think there is a potential for that and is a risk that we've talked about. As we go through the 2022 budget process, we'll be taking a look at how firm are the estimates on that capital budget. It's hard to predict what exactly, when I read the budget documents from yesterday, it's hard to tell exactly what the federal government plans to do. There seems to be a lot of emphasis on rural construction and infrastructure. So there's a good question as to, does that impact the supply, like you're suggesting? But I don't have a definitive answer yet.
So but as you say, you're you're looking at that.
Yep.
Okay, that's good, and we'll be looking at that, making adjustments as necessary through the 2022 budget process to approve capital projects already. So, I guess so. I'm wondering then on this on the North End plant, does there come a time? I mean, no bid, both bids came in, you know, off the mark with what we set.
Mhm.
Is there, you know, do you look at just kind of backing away because the ISIP funds have not been approved and then re-tendering again? Is that an option as well? Or you say you're coming forward with a preferred vendor to committee, but just how do you get to that process? I guess that's what I'm asking.
With the report that we're coming forward with, we are going to recommend that we award this contract. But it's the preferred proponent because we're not actually, and asking for the budget to do that. We're not recommending that we stop and restart. If we stop and restart, we're probably adding at least a couple more years to the schedule.
Okay.
And if we stop and restart, there's no assurance that the prices would come in any better, right? I think, you know, we may be hurt. I mean, it may be a risk to the market if the city underwent this, you know, 2-year procurement process, and then at the end of the day didn't award it. And, you know, that made the price of the risk to the private sector may be higher if we did that, right? How they would respond to the city, you know, acting that way. So we don't think that there would be any benefit schedule or cost-wise to retender.
Okay. And my final question on this is the request from the province to look at a P3. It's not related to the headworks. It's related to the next project, right? It's related to the biosolids.
The province has asked us to look at a P3 option for biosolids and BNR,
And
biological nutrient removal,
Yeah, okay.
which isn't even on the books yet, but they've asked us to look at both of those.
But it's not related to the headworks. This is,
Not related to the headworks at all, no.
okay, thank you. Yes, Councilor Rollins.
So just piggybacking on that question. So I'm still looking at what the feds did yesterday. I think it sounds somewhat like good news in terms of climate change resiliency and 2 funds that may support some of the infrastructure we have, whether that's Infrastructure Canada sort of top up for stormwater systems and or their new a new program that they introduced. You're probably doing the same. I relied on Catherine's briefing for the provincial budget, so which was excellent. So I'm looking forward to that. You're probably going through it the same as I am, and trying to find sort of the good news for water infrastructure. But you know, coupled, you know, because there was some resilience funding and infrastructure funding related to water in the budget. I am concerned that a P3 review is going to tie up time on a priority that I think Winnipeggers expect us to have some short-term outcomes turnover. So a few questions. We did do a P3 on the Charleswood Bridge. Is your concept of the work a bit of a lit review of what we've done in terms of P3s in the city? In the case of the Charleswood Bridge, I think we're still paying interest to the private sector, whereas our cost of borrowing, you know, over that same time period, you know, would have fallen. So I don't know how you're approaching this work. I think there has been work that would allow us to swiftly put this concept of P3s aside And I mean, I believe that they cost more financially, mostly because you might miss out on opportunities in budget to move swiftly. And I think that they commit infrastructure really in specific ways for a longer period of time. And then most of all, I'm worried that even though the lure of them is that, you know, you can move it off your books potentially, they prevent City of Winnipeg, I think, from refinancing debt, because debt is then held in the private sector. So I'm wondering if we can just dispense with it fairly quickly based on our past experience with the Charleswood Bridge, for instance, or other types of infrastructure, or does it, you know, do we have to, you know, do a deep dive before we dispense with it? I know that the province, when they, you know, explored P3s that this government did for schools, they came back and it took, you know, a good fiscal, you lost out on a fiscal year. So that's my concern. And it's my concern because, you know, Canada's infrastructure program, it came out, you know, pretty much yesterday. And if we can take advantage of that, I'd like to, you know, dispense with the P3 nonsense swiftly. My words, they don't have to be yours, obviously.
No, I can certainly answer that, Councillor. There was a report at council last month where we provided an update on the north end, the headworks and the biosolids project. So we can't dispense with the P3 analysis quickly. We have been in conversations with the province since the summer of 2020. We had intended to proceed with biosolids on a design bid build.
Yeah.
The ISIP application asked us to do this P3 analysis, and we have done some work. We've had some conversations with the province. They've just recently clarified some additional work that they want us to do. So
Which
we're-
included that, because
Yeah.
the ISIP application that everyone applies for, it doesn't include an extra step on P3s. That's the Canadian application. It doesn't.
Yeah, and the analysis, and you're right. I mean, it's really how much do you pay for risk transfer and certainty? That's really the debate, right? And the cost of borrowing for municipalities versus the private sector. So all of that, so we're going to do, I wouldn't say a deep dive, but a fairly deep dive is what we'll have to do. And we're just working out the details of what that scope of work will be. And I think it's quite probable that we'll be at, I don't know if it would be EPC or Water and Waste. I need to speak to clerks in the CAO's office, but I think there will be a report coming forward describing or asking for authority to enter into a contract with a consultant to do the work and describe a bit of the work that we have to do. So that's probably, I mean, we're going to be very open and transparent with City Council on the work that we have to do, because it is a requirement of the application. So the biosolids application, and the scope is biosolids and biological nutrient removal, but the biosolids application has not even been forwarded to the federal government yet, because the process with the bilateral agreement is the province does their review and then they send it to the feds. They haven't even sent it to the feds yet. So,
And that's my comment with respect to wasting time. Like if it could run concurrently, we wouldn't be wasting time. They could forward the ISIP grant to the feds, bada bing, bada boom. We're still waiting, but we're waiting in a position of strength.
we tried
Yeah,
to
okay.
do that. Yeah, we had that conversation. Mr. Ruda certainly had that conversation. Yeah, we did try.
I'm sure you did.
Other questions at all? Councillor Schreier?
Thank you. Just a few minutes ago, 3 minutes ago, we were talking about, Maura, you talked about the cost of borrowing from municipalities versus the private sector. What was your point in that case? You said about 3-4 minutes ago.
The reference, Councillor, was in response to Councillor Rollins' comments that typically governments can borrow money at lower rates than the private sector. That was all that it was.
All right, but what was the context regarding P3s?
Just because depending on how you deliver a project, the there could be additional costs to a city because if the private sector has to borrow money as opposed to the city borrowing money, it could increase the cost of the project. That was the context.
Okay. My understanding is during P3s, when there's a private contractor involved, that in all these cases, because it's done very much on the strength of the taxpayer, that in all these cases, you get the preferred interest rate because it's the taxpayer paying for it. In other words, it's not the private corporation that's applying for the loan. It's merely on the strength of it being paid by taxes with a government contract. Am I misinterpreting what a P3 is?
It could be the city borrowing, it could be the private sector borrowing, it could be, maybe Catherine, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think Councillor Schreier, it really depends on the circumstances. In my experience, coming from a previous entity that had a credit rating with an A status, when we went to borrow for a P3, we ended up not getting that same credit rating on the debt issuance because it was related to the other entity. And so it really depends on the exact situation. And on top of the interest rate or the potential interest rate differential, the private sector does build in a profit margin. So you really have to do the math on each individual case and see whether it makes sense to have the private sector borrow. And then we put that debt on our books in a matter of speaking, because we take those long-term cash flows and put them on as debt. If you look at the annual report of the city, you'll see the P3 debt is sitting there. It's not the actual bond that the contractor issued, but that's our debt to the contractor. So it does eat into our borrowing capacity. And there's a lot of factors, which is what I understand the consultants will be helping Water and Waste figure out whether or not the P3 would make sense compared to the potential cost of the design build. So I don't know if there's a definitive yes or no answer until you do the work on each case.
Oh, that's a good point, Catherine. I'm sure there's instances where there are exceptions. I'm just saying, how could it possibly be anything other than the general rule that interest rates are lower when it's backed by the taxpayer? I'm trying to think of an instance in which a private corporation is going to get a lower interest rate for a multi-billion-dollar contract or something like that when the taxpayer is not the guarantor. And so I can't think of anything offhand. Thank you for the hypothetical. I'm just wondering, can you think of anything regarding the city of Winnipeg, a P3 with the city of Winnipeg, in which the private contractor would have received a lower interest rate independent of the city backing the project?
I would have to say I'm not aware of a specific example,
Me neither.
but we could check into that. May not have that information readily available.
Fair enough. And that's like, let's face it, Catherine, we're talking about many decades here of information to learn from, but not that we're all sort of meant to have that at our fingertips today. But I'm betting my perspective as a politician that what I'm saying is essentially true, that it's literally impossible for these multi-billion-dollar, multi-million-dollar contracts for them to get a preferred interest rate without the taxpayer sort of guaranteeing it, kind of thing. I am confused about, it just shakes my whole concept of economics, that it's possible not to do this without the public sector because of the taxpayer. You talked about the private corporation at Triple P taking a commission or a percentage on the interest rate. Again, how often would that be the case when it is my absolute understanding? I mean, if I'm wrong, there's a lot to talk about here, whereby it's the taxpayer, it's the government that's guaranteeing this, and thus, how is it that the private corporation gets a percentage of the interest rate? I can see why they'll take something off because they know they're getting paid. We're talking the taxpayer here. And when does the taxpayer not pay? The taxpayer always pays, kind of thing. That's the one guarantee in the world. Taxpayer pays.
I think Councillor Schreier, just to clarify, I was saying that if the private sector is going into a contract, they're doing so with the expectation of making a profit. And it's not necessarily related to the interest rate. It's just they're not going to do the work. unless they get rewarded for the risk they're taking on. So there is a profit component to the contract. That was my point.
Oh, fair enough. And I understand that. A point was made regarding a percentage of the interest rate. That's what I didn't understand, because that's where the corporation sort of has the guarantee. The low interest rate is due to the taxpayer guaranteeing, giving the guarantee, and thus lower interest rate, thus everyone wins kind of thing. I just don't know where the percentage of the interest rate, where that fits in. I'm not sure who said that, whether Catherine or Moira. The issue is percentage of the interest rate.
I think the analysis that we do ultimately is to look at what's the best value for the taxpayer. That's really what it is, and that's the approach we'll take, right? It's so, I mean, there's different components to a project, so ultimately it's like, what's the best value for money, and that's how those decisions are made. Typically, that's how those decisions.
I'd love to think that was the case, and I understand that's earnestly, the concern of any individual or department at any given time. It's just, I think we're having a conversation today based on whether triple Ps are in fact as effective for the taxpayer as we say. The argument's pretty large kind of thing. That's not new. But nonetheless, I think that's part of what's going on here today. There's a glut of work, Maury. You said there's a glut of work, and therefore it's causing construction costs to go up. I mean, just a couple of years ago, we had a representative at our budget meeting, a representative from the Manitoba Heavy Construction Association, saying because the provincial government had cut their road budget by over 40%, that there was a glut of work, or I'm not sure what you mean by glut of work, provisions by the government, providing employment opportunities by the government, or there's so much work out there from the private sector. Where is this glut of work coming from?
In terms of like the overall in wastewater projects and in the project that we experienced, that was certainly an influencing factor, was supply and demand. We had a major contract. There was 2 bidders, and both bidders came in over the budget threshold, which was independently verified by 3 parties. I think what's happening in the global economy is upside down because of the pandemic. And I think many governments are trying to keep it going as far as what the impact is in the future. And I think Mr. Chair asked that question of our CFO, which I think the CFO and also the infrastructure planning office will look at that, because every year when we do budgets, we look at what indices we use and how we budget and how we do that. So I think it's something the city, as I understand, probably it's the CFO, the director of asset management, the city economist, everybody looking at that to see what the potential impact may be to capital planning. That's the experience that we had on this one project. And that's the advice that we got from our expert team that worked with us. As far as what it does to the rest of the spend, I couldn't answer that, but I think that's part of Catherine's research, as she shared with Councillor Gillingham earlier.
Any further questions on this report, Councillor Schreier?
Yes, thank you. I do have a couple. And thanks for delving into this, both Councillors Gillingham and Rollins, and some good questions. We talk about supply and demand. We're talking about COVID related factors in why costs are going up. So when I raise the issue of increasing construction costs, no one's really disputing what I say, but what I am told is, but it's the various factors involved in the construction. You have to look at that. It's not fair not to. And of course, that's true. Of course. In this case, we're saying that there's costs are going up. We're already getting in this one an application for a 15% increase in a major construction contract, let alone general annual construction inflation increases. And what what are these specific costs that are going up in supply and demand in the international market? We seem rather certain that that's the case, and I'm not disputing it. So, like, can we get an example, a few examples of what these are, what these supply and demand in COVID globe, sort of the COVID era is that's making these costs go up?
I, not to jump in, I don't know that our staff would have examples. I think they're probably focused on our own projects, and you know, their consultants, as I heard today, the consultants are indicating that part of what we're experiencing is related to kind of the global or national or kind of North American context, that there's a lot of work out there for contractors, and so they can pick and choose their projects, and the bid prices are reflecting that, but I don't know if they would have specific examples. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not sure if Catherine or Moira have specific examples. No? Okay.
But the consultant provided that information to the city administration, presumably based on specifics. So I'm just wondering, can those consultants, as Councillor Gillingham made the point from the consultants, can those indices from the consultants be availed to the rest of us?
I think the advice from the consultants is based upon their experience on other projects. It's not based upon an index. The report on the headworks will be coming to Water and Waste Committee next month on May 7th. And there's some more detail in that report as to what we believe are the drivers for the exceeding the budget threshold. But we don't have any specific indices. I mean, we went through a request for qualifications, a request for proposal, and this is what came back.
So we don't know why the contracts are going up. Like, we don't know why specifically. We have no idea what specifically is driving these contracts to go up.
I with all respect, I think that's been answered.
Okay, so I'm asking again, I'm sorry, Councillor Gillingham, what is causing it? We're saying COVID and a glut in demand, or a glut of work, but because of COVID, there's less risk that the companies want to take. So I'm just saying, by virtue of there's being a lot of work, even though it's COVID, there's extra work to get done. So prices are going up because there's more demand, but at the same time, because of COVID, the companies want to take less risks, so they put their company, their costs up. But what are the specifics? Like, what are the factors? I haven't heard one yet, so I'm just hoping we can do that one day.
Okay.
Okay, perhaps then what we'll do is you ask for one day. Maybe we'll have our staff take that away, and if there's anything that staff could, you know, as Ms. Gear said, there's a report coming forward to the Water Waste Committee, and if there's anything specific in there that will be available, I don't know if that can be included or not, Ms. Gear.
We will speak to more of the details similar to the South End report that was here today. We are alerting in our financial status report that we're coming forward with this, but the detail will be in the report that's at Water and Waste Committee next month.
Okay. Thank you.
Boyd, just a couple other, I guess, a couple of questions. Just specifically in the report itself, there's a couple of questions I have, small things, and then I'll go back to kind of a wrap-up question or two. On what I have as page 7 of the report, under the biosolids facilities headline, it says there are no risks identified for the biosolids facility project. I guess I'm kind of surprised at that statement, given the discussion we had related to P3 and the timing of ISIP. So I would see those as being risks. I'm not sure if I'm misreading that or something.
I think the context there is we've said there's no risk in the project right now because it hasn't started. I mean, the fact that it's, you know, we could have maybe said the only risk is that it hasn't begun, but there is no risk because we haven't moved on it at all. That's what the intention of that statement was. But
I see, because the risk,
we can change the language.
yeah, I just wondered, because the risk related, of course, is substantial if we're waiting on the approval of financing for that report. Another couple of questions I have is, sorry, I'm working out of order here. Page 4, Again, on the new pick upgrade biosolids facility, it says notice of alteration. In there, it says October 16th, 2020, Manitoba Conservation and Climate issued a letter. Then halfway through that paragraph, it says, and changed that the province was adapting their role. What does that mean, that the province is adapting their role?
If you go back to, it was December 2019, when the province advised the city they were forming those committees. We had those
Right.
committees, the project steering committee and project advisory committee. That was meeting and we produced reports that were public reports in October of 2020. The province advised the city they were disbanding those committees. So we had regular meetings with the stakeholder group
Right.
and we did monthly reporting to the stakeholder group. The province stood back. They said, we don't want the committees anymore. We're continuing the reporting. The city will still meet with the stakeholder group, but those committees were basically disbanded, is what that means. So,
Okay,
because they had us with these committees that were going to exist forever and a day and report monthly on the project and meet. There was a technical group and then there was a steering committee. Those committees were dissolved and now the city's just reporting as opposed to having a joint committee with the province.
so the city just reported directly to the province, no committees involved.
We're reporting to the province and we
Okay.
also have a commitment to meet with the, we'll continue to meet quarterly with the stakeholder group as information to provide them information, which is Lake Winnipeg Foundation, International Institute of Sustainable
see.
Development and the Lake Winnipeg Indigenous Collective.
The other question I have then is back to the project budget. In page 10 of this report, of course, we always, for the longest time, we've had the power supply and headworks facilities kind of as one project, right, at 408 million. But specifically, as the report indicates, the power supply project is well underway, pretty much, done. So in reading the ISIP application reports, it would indicate that the headworks facilities project on its own is not 408, but of course, a portion of the 408 is 356 million, right? Is
Yes.
that correct? So
56.
356. So, so the $65 million increase is on the 356, not on really the total 408. Is that correct? Because the power supply component, the portion that is the power supply, the
It's
65 million
yeah.
increase is not related to that, is what I'm trying to say, correct?
That's correct. That's
So
correct.
So the $65 million increase is related to the $356 million that is the headworks project.
Yeah, that's a fair statement because the power supply has been completed and we did not apply for funding on power supply.
So you indicate that even within our class estimation system, a $65 million increase on the 356 is within the range permitted under the standards that we use. Correct? I think
Um,
that plus 30% or full
Yeah.
30%. I don't have that standard
Yeah, I've
in
got
front
it
of me
here.
right now, but I'm just trying to understand what you indicate it's within the range. What percentage of an increase is it? Is that 20, 18?
I was looking at it on the 408. Just bear with me a moment, Counselor.
No, I just have one.
That's like an
final
18.
comment. 18% increase? Okay.
18. So it is within, even on the 350, even on the 356 denominator, it's still.
Because what is the range? Is it plus 20, plus 30?
It's plus,
Anyways, we can look at that, but the bottom line is it's within the range, okay? So I guess kind of I'm trying to sum it up, a bit of the takeaway then on the previous project, the south end, which we'll see a $16.5 million increase. The north end, which we're looking at as a $65 million increase, so that's $81.5 million increases on the two projects. And to summarize, there's complexities, but just in summary, the reasons are delays, contractor performance on the south end, delays, and COVID and market conditions. Is that a summary of?
I think that's a
Of
fair
those?
summary, Counselor, yes.
And then these reports, both south end and north end, will go to the standing committee on water waste for approval of cost increases.
We're at committee on May the 7th.
May 7th.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, the final question then, sorry, the $65 million, again, we assume if everything goes according to plan, that on the headworks facilities, the federal government will make a contribution, the provincial government will make a contribution, assuming that the ISIP application gets approved. Which of course, this idea of the province asking for a P3, not only does it on the biosolids, not only holds up the biosolids, but it holds up this headworks project as well.
No, Headworks is being processed right now. It's just we applied for funding on both, so the Headworks is being reviewed right now. Like they haven't held back the Headworks application, like that has gone to the federal government.
Okay, oh, it has.
Biosolids hasn't left the province yet, but the
Okay.
Headworks is being
If
reviewed. by
you said that, I
feds.
missed that. Thank you. Okay,
Sorry.
so that's being reviewed. Good. Okay, good. I was mid-thought and I lost it. That's good.
Okay,
Anything further?
I'm happy to move.
Okay, it is moved by Councillor Rollins. All in favor, aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Oh, that's the question. I'm going to sneak it in after the fact if I can. I'm the chair. I'll permit myself on this one. The $65 million, what is the funding source for that? The 16.5 was retained earnings. $65 million, the funding source would be?
The 65 million, but what we're going to report to committee next month, because it's the 65 million, the 16.5 million. Of course, the other report that we had earlier this year was the interim phosphorus, which was not in the budget. So as we put together our budgets, we're going to come back in the fall to report on it, give an update on our rates, to look at those plans, because we're adding 100 million to our rate plan. Not necessarily suggesting that we're going to ask for a change in the rates, but we have an obligation to report back to council to say, how are we going to pay for this within our financial plan? So in the reports, as we'll come back later this year, just to give an update on how we would fund these increases.
Chair
Okay.
Gilliam,
Stay tuned.
Yep.
Yeah,
if I may, this is all based on a level 3 estimate. What is it's level 3, right?
class 3? Yes.
Pardon me?
Yes, yes, it's a class 3 estimate. Correct, yes.
Class 3. And what's the estimate margin for a class 3 estimate?
I have that now. It's minus 20 plus 30.
Minus, did you hear that? Minus 20
Minus
plus 30.
20
Yeah.
plus 30.
20 plus 30. So we might already be at like plus 20 with this plus 15, something like that. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Maura.
Thank you.
Moving on to report number 5.
Right, so we'll shift gears. Report number 5 is the quarterly report from the Winnipeg Police Service. With us today, we have Tara Aloka, Manager of Finance with Winnipeg Police. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Chair.
Morning, Ms. Holoka.
Good morning. Today I'll be reporting on the fourth quarter budget update for the Winnipeg Police Service. If you're following along on the report, on page 3, you'll see a graphic representation of some of the major categories of revenue and expense. There are details in the body of the report, but I'd like to take a moment to highlight some of these areas. Overall, revenue is down from 2019 and under budget by 5%. With respect to traffic enforcement, both traditional and photo enforcement are down. And this is a major driver of the revenue budget shortfall overall. Criminal record checks are also under budget, and these shortfalls are primarily driven as a result of the impact of COVID-19. Services revenue is up and over budget. This is primarily as a result of special duty volume increases. Government grants are also up. There was federal drug impaired driving funding, which helped to offset some of the shortfalls in the other areas. Additionally, there's criminal property forfeiture and guns and gangs funding, which were offset by expenses of the same value, and therefore there's neutral impact on the budget. On the expenses side, salary and benefits are up about 2% from the prior year. This is driven by contractual increases. As you're aware, the service was projecting a budget shortfall related to the police pension. However, there was attrition savings that exceeded the forecast, and overtime was down, which helped to offset this shortfall. There were contract savings and services as a result of photo enforcement revenue being down, and this also helped to offset some of the revenue budget shortfalls. Other categories such as assets and materials, costs, and supplies were up and over budget. This is primarily as a result of spending related to guns and gangs, criminal property forfeiture. As I mentioned before, there are revenues to offset those expenditures. The service also had budget pressures related to COVID-19 in all non-salary accounts. On page 9 of the report is an overall financial status for 2020. You'll note that there is a shortfall on the mill rate support. This is driven by the police pension shortfall and COVID pressures, which is offset by unbudgeted funding related to the federal drug impaired driving and other incremental revenues, as well as savings largely related to salary and benefits. The total shortfall was 3.2 million. And that concludes my report. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you for that summary. I have a couple, but I think Councillor Rollins has one or two as well. Councillor Rollins.
Thank you for the summary. On page 5, the police services are up primarily due to special duty volume. Do you have, it's difficult to know or evaluate this special duty. We've made changes in budget to more fully capture, I think it was the budget 2020 process between 2019, 2020 fiscal year. Budget working group made changes to capture, full cost recovery. Those I supported, but it's often the preventative kind, the policing. I'm wondering if you have a year-over-year capture of that figure. I'm wondering if there has been a different strain year-over-year on the Winnipeg Police budget with respect to this special duty volume.
Just to clarify, are you looking for year-over-year?
You have year-over-year here, sorry. Multi-year, sorry.
Okay, multi-year. Just for special duty, looking at the revenue volumes? Just want to make sure that I understand the question.
That's right.
Okay, you know what, I can certainly look at having something prepared for the committee with respect to that. Maybe 5 years back, would that be helpful?
That'd be great.
Okay.
Is there anything that you could further comment on with respect to the police services are up primarily due to special duty volume?
So yes, it's largely driven by the special duty volumes, which started to increase in mid 2019. So you'll note that the volume, the amount is just slightly over the total 2020 revenue is just slightly over what we saw in 2019, but significantly over budget. So we started to see special duty volumes increase in mid 2019, and this is largely driven by retail special duty.
Okay.
Which continued through 2020.
Okay, thank you very much, Sue.
Thank you. And that answered one of my questions, because I saw special duty and I know that sometimes special duty is utilized for big events, whether it's hockey games or football games, whatever. With none of those happening due to COVID, I wasn't sure if indeed retail was the source of the special duty. So you've answered that. Thank you. We've got a couple other questions, but I know Councillor Schreier has a question or two. Councillor Schreier.
Thank you. So we're looking at expenses went up by 1% in 2020. So it says over budget by 3 million. So over budget by 3 million, but we're seeing that the original budget, there was no intended increase in the police budget. Was that zero? So it went up by 3 million, not 300 million. It was a 1% over budget. Is that what we're saying?
That's right. Now, I caution that with these figures, the primary driver of those expenses being over budget is related to the guns and gangs and the criminal property forfeiture. So there are revenues that offset those expenditures. So there's no impact on the mill rate. So there's some of those items that affect both the revenue and the expense side.
Okay. So you're explaining to me specifically why you have a 1% over budget. I'm trying to get why in the last one we've got a construction inflation of 20% and we can't, I'm not explained why at all. So thank you for your clarity, by the way, for being able to explain a 1% increase when I can't get anything about a 20% increase in construction costs. So what we're saying is that the police budget wasn't even budgeted for an increase between 2019 and 2020.
Yes, there was a budgeted increase, and that was primarily driven by salary and benefit increases,
Yes.
right?
All right.
And
So salary and benefits went up by 2%.
that's right, yes.
Okay, 2%. And with salary and benefits going up by 2%, it was a 1% over budget. All right. Well, thank you for your clarity. I wish we could get that clarity whenever we're 1% over budget. That'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of other questions. First of all, I want to acknowledge the efforts of the police service and all the departments, but here we have the police service report. The efforts of the police service in 2020 in the midst of COVID to manage expenditures and revenues, and it happens, I think, every year. The service works hard to manage their budget, and I acknowledge that again, and this report reflects that. So thank you very much for you and your team. A couple of questions I have. The one you mentioned, of course, the federal guns and gangs, both revenue and then corresponding expenses related to that. Just remind us, is it somewhat hard to budget for that on an annual basis, because that number, you may get an announcement mid-year on what that amount is. You don't exactly know what that amount is, and the offsetting expenditures related to that amount. Can you just explain that a little bit further, please?
Yes, that's exactly it. So, with respect to the guns and gangs and criminal property forfeiture, those amounts can be uncertain at budget time. Particularly with respect to criminal property forfeiture, that amount can vary year over year greatly, and the alignment of the funding year isn't in line with our fiscal year. So the total amount can really vary. So it hasn't been budgeted in the past. For 2021, however, we worked with financial planning and review, and guns and gangs is part of the 2021 and 2022 budget, adopted budget, both revenue and expense.
Excellent. Thank you very much. The only other question I have, I think, is on page 8 of the report. This is page 8 of my report. I think it's page 8 of your report here. It's at the very bottom. It is related to the credit cards. Over budget for 2020 related to credit card commission expenses as a result of increased online and cashless payment methods, offset by increase in police services revenue. Can you just explain that a little bit further, please? I think the statement is pretty self-explanatory, but if you could kind of give us a little bit more information on that, that would be helpful, please.
Certainly. So as we're all aware, police services is up so largely as a result of retail special duty, and those retail outlets are paying with credit cards. So of course, there's going to be a corresponding credit card commission increase. And that's covered as part of the police services revenue. So you'll note that there's an increase in the expense, but it can be covered through the revenue.
So the retail outlets, many of them who hire special duty officers, are making their payments for the special duty officers with their credit cards.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Does the Winnipeg Police Service offer air miles? Just kidding.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right. I'm just wondering then for our CFO though, if there's other departments that I think take credit cards as well. So I'm just wondering if there's, if we see credit card increases related to credit card commissions in other departments as well. I mean, they're just springing this on you now. So if you don't have the information, fine, but can we look into that if you don't have that information?
Yes, we'll look into that because for sure, community services, those types of registration will take that, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Appreciate that. So, okay. I don't have any other questions at this time. Councillor Schreier?
Yeah, on the credit card, it would be interesting to know that if in any of these cases, if we are aware that there are any value points acquired through the credit card purchases to the extent that would be of benefit to any department or the city. Since you asked, Councillor Gillingham, it's half sarcastic, but I'm just curious to see if there's anything there regarding credit cards or these things done by the city in which.
Well,
Give a quizzical look, Councillor Gillingham.
yeah, no, I was just thinking, Ms. Gleffler is going to be looking at, in coming back to us with information related to credit cards. So maybe she can grab that question too and find an answer for us. Thank
So
you.
just to clarify, Councillor Schreier, you're asking whether or not as a city, when we're using our purchasing cards, we're getting any benefit back from that? Whether it's a cashback or something else?
Yeah,
Question? Okay, I will look into that.
thank you.
Okay, any further questions from the Winnipeg Police Service? No. Thank you very much, Ms. Saloka. Councillor Arlico moves this report. Okay, thank you. It's moved for information. All those in favor, aye. Opposed, carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. Item number 6 is the Winnipeg Police Board fourth quarter report.
Correct. And with us today is Shawna Curtin, who is the Secretary of the Board, and she can answer any questions on this report, Councillor.
Okay, thank you very much. I think, good morning, Ms. Curtin. I think it's pretty straightforward. It's like the police service, the Winnipeg Police Board is coming in under budget for 2020.
That's correct. A small surplus of $59,379.
Okay,
So moved.
thank you. I think I say this on a regular basis. Also appreciate the efforts of the Winnipeg Police Board to certainly to manage their budget on an annual basis. So any questions at all? We have a motion on the floor from Councillor Rollins. Councillor Schreier.
No, I would just like to make the point, once again, a great government department that's, being accountable and in the process is doing very well with its budget. This is not, believe me, not going to solve our fiscal and budgetary problems of the city. I'm glad they're doing it. It's the right thing. I wish we could all do that. We're hemorrhaging in construction. And if somehow, as a government and those who are elected, take our responsibility to try and find out why other departments, particularly in construction, can't do what the police department is doing, we're in a lot of trouble. When we can't in some way, shape, or form be as specific as the police board is and the police budget regarding the expenses and how they're capable of even having a quarter of being under budget.
Okay, thank you. The motion to receive it as information is on the floor. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Thank you very much, Ms. Curtin. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you, Councillor.
Item number 7. Let me see, right here. Okay, item number 7 is the status of the provincial grants.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll touch on the highlights of the update that was provided in the meeting materials. So first, regarding operating funding, as expected, the province announced flat or stable funding for the city's operations for the 2021 year. 75% of those funds will be advanced to the city by the end of May, with the rest in the fall. And the amount of that funding is $121.2 million. A new initiative to note, there's a pilot project being conducted between the province and Winnipeg Police Service, with the co-location of 3 provincial victim services staff at WPS headquarters. This initiative doesn't have any impact on our operational funding right now. They're covering their own costs on that project. So as noted in the report, discussions around the cost recovery model for ambulance and EMS services with Shared Health is ongoing. And we learned late last week that recovery amount, as noted in the written report, still in flux. It's ranging between full cost recovery to potential shortfall. So we will keep this committee informed of the developments on that front. The provincial budget also included an education property tax rebate program, which impacts the city's assessment and taxation department productions of the bills to taxpayers. Programming changes for the amounts owing have been completed and tested, and production of bills started yesterday. This rebate is being achieved by reducing the amount of the previous tax credit, which therefore increases the amount payable to the city. And then the province will issue physical checks to taxpayers to lower their overall bills. This has some repercussions for our taxpayers. In some cases, city residents who have not been paying any tax amounts to the city as their assessments were below the provincial tax credit amount, may now have amounts owing in June, and this will be offset by the issuance of the check from Manitoba, which is expected to occur in June. TIP customers will also see an increase in their monthly amounts, again with the offsetting check once a year. So the city's 311 team is prepared to answer questions, either specifically or to refer taxpayers to the appropriate provincial contact number, which will also be printed on the bills and on an insert. And then with respect to capital funding, the annual basket infrastructure amount of 75.3 million is approved for 2021. However, the allocation of those funds has not yet been agreed to by the province. So the public service continues to work with the province to obtain that agreement as soon as possible, given the construction season is upon us. Councillors and staff are both anxious to start planning projects and get them underway. And for example, many would like to access the Recreation and Library Facility Investment Strategy Capital Funds for 50 million, but that can't occur until we get that agreement of the allocation. So the public service is submitting additional requested information to the province, and we agree that time is of the essence in this regard. And discussions with respect to the NUPIC project are also ongoing, as we just touched on in the previous session. So the NUPIC amounts were adjusted in your report to take into account about $10 million in design consulting fees, which were incurred that are no longer considered eligible for cost sharing. So that didn't change the total on that little chart, but what it changed was the allocation between the parties. And so just to recap, our priorities regarding the province include NUPIC, the urgency of the ISIP applications to be submitted, and the allocation of the basket funding. Also of note, which is not included in the written report because that's a provincial funding report, but I thought I should touch on the one-time announcement of the doubling of gas tax allocations by the federal government. We are preparing a report to come back to council on a proposed allocation of that 44.6 million. And just as a note, there's a new name. They don't want to call it gas tax anymore. It'll be called the Canada Community Building Fund because it's not a direct link to gas tax anymore. So I've mainly focused on the 2021 situation in my written or spoken regard here, but the report also outlines 2020, 2019, and 2018 funding situations, with numerous items slowly moving towards finalization. 2018 and 2019 have a total of 1.7 million left to be resolved, while 2020 has some ongoing discussions and finalization of payments for agreed on projects, and some payments were received as recently as last month. So in addition, just as a note, the invoicing continues for the Municipal Enforcement Support Program, which started last year related to the pandemic. So that concludes my summary of the provincial situation, Mr. Chair.
Okay, other questions related to it? Councillor Orlico, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, just thank you very much. Regarding the changes to the education taxing or how it's formed. So presently, we send out the tax bill on behalf of the province. I was always supportive of that because we're actually sitting on behalf of school boards. However, and I was always concerned about the fact of sending out two checks or two different mailers seemed to be a little bit redundant.
Mm-hmm.
But my understanding now is with this new format, we'll send out our bill, which will everybody will assume is both the cities and the property taxes and school board taxes are all ours, because it says on the letter, even though we have nice color coding going on. And then the province will send a rebate check separately. Is that how it's supposed to work?
Yes, that's what will occur.
I don't think it's for you to answer, and please don't bother if you don't have to. Why is it not just being deducted off the bill right off the hop? You know, is that just, do you have an answer? Is that anything in the, I can see politically why I think it, but that's not your job. So is there anything they state why that is?
I believe, Councillor, that it has to do with the way the legislation is presently written. And Minister Fielding did introduce some new legislation yesterday to address some of this issue, but I can't speak to the complete rationale or logic behind it. Although there are some FAQs on the province's website specifically with that question.
Okay, I'll double check that. But at this point, the city of Winnipeg is obligated through the charter, I believe, to collect those property taxes. Is that correct? For school boards.
I do not know the specific answer to that, but we can confirm that yes or no for you if you want.
No, I'll just keep an eye on it. I do intend to not support in the future with the mayor. If this is the way it's going, it's to me a shell game. That they will do either two things, or they can. I think we'll just have, if they can do rebate checks, they'll be more than happy to have the province send out their own property tax bill. So we'll look at that in the future. Thank you.
Just to add to that, Councillor, is the province does pay us a fee to process the bills for them. So we have to keep that in mind as well.
Thank you.
Actually, on that, if I may, thank you for the questions, Councilor Orlico. I was thinking if we'll deal with this later, I'd like to ask our CFO if she could work with our assessment taxation department to prepare for this committee a bit of a report specific to what has changed with education taxes and the mail out and the rebate, just so we have a clear understanding, from our staff's end, what the impact is to our assessment taxation department, if there's any impact to our revenues, expenses as well. So I'll probably float that motion, Mr. Clerk, in a little minute to get that report back. So any other questions on this report? I've got a couple, but Councillor Rollins?
Yeah, so what was introduced yesterday also in the community revitalization is the piece that governs tax increment financing. So I'm still reading what was introduced, but that piece, I'll be supporting. I'll likely be supporting the chair's motion, but I probably would also want to consider that community revitalization piece because it wasn't clear it's not clear to me yet, but it was embedded in the changes that the minister announced yesterday, both the education property tax, which, for reasons Councillor Orlico states, I was watching that too, but also because the second piece, is rebates related to community revitalization. No one over here, believes that it isn't time to come together financially. So that piece, I don't think any Manitoban wants a check in their pocketbooks as opposed to their communities being invested in and revitalized. And so that piece, because it's related to a different act, is a piece on the goal that I want to track to. So it's good that we have, it's good that you're bringing forward a motion, but I'm really concerned about that second piece because when I think of community revitalization, I think of the Community Revitalization Tax Increment Financing Act. So I'm not sure if that is the legislator's intent here, but it's one that I want to keep an eye on, because it's then, tied up in our basic, how government then basically supports some key economic development structures. We've been sort of waiting on our tax increment finance policy. I would like to see it, but this is a separate move. It's a bit of a game changer. So I don't know if you can comment on it early. I know that this was all happening yesterday with the federal budget.
Yeah, no, I did not have a chance to look at that particular piece
Okay.
yet.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a lot happening right now in real time, isn't there?
Yeah.
Okay. I do want to acknowledge also, thank you for clarifying related to the provincial capital funding is that, though certainly we do appreciate the province has made their commitment and it's been consistent on their capital funding to the City of Winnipeg, and we can budget accordingly. Ultimately, what hasn't changed is that the allocation of that capital funding and how it gets allocated, spent, invested. So the city can notionally allocate provincial capital funding. There's still a process which remains the same and has for years, whereby the province basically agrees to a mutually agreed upon allocation. And that's a process that's happening right now. And that's why, as you indicate, some of the 2021 capital budgets that have provincial funding attached cannot yet proceed until we get basically concurrence from the province of Manitoba, correct?
That's correct.
And that's happening right now.
That is
So
correct. It's underway.
It's underway. Okay, good. The other thing, I think, just to note as well, thank you, you're doing your work on getting clarity on the federal gas tax, where the federal government has indicated a one-time doubling of the gas tax, so it would be an incremental increase. Based on that doubling of the gas tax, that would be how much would that be?
44.6 million, if that's the correct number. That's what we have in our
44.6,
budget this
okay.
year, so yes.
$44.6 million one-time increase.
Yep.
But you're, again, getting the
province-
details on that.
Yeah, it has to flow through the province, so assuming they give us the same amount, it's 44.6 million.
Okay. I think with, I'll just say it now, with COVID still unfortunately well underway, I think that prudence will be the rule of the day, I think, on the allocation and timing of the allocation of that $44.6 million. Okay, any other questions related to this? Okay, a motion then to receive this as information. Thank you, Councillor Orlico. Okay, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Wonder, Mr. Clerk, I know we have one more report. If I can bring forward my motion though at this point to, don't know if we've already worked on some wording or not, but the motion, do we need to have can I bring a motion? Do we need a
Yeah.
suspension of the rules?
Mr. Chair, I believe this motion is related to the item on the agenda, so if you word it as further,
Okay.
the Standing Policy Committee on Finance request of public service.
Yes, so request the public service report back on the details related to the changes in education levies and the impact on the assessment and taxation department, including city revenues, city expenses, workload. Councillor Orlico, do you want to add anything to that?
I just want to make sure I'm clear, the potential changes. The bill hasn't gone through yet and being passed, and I
Thank
hope it
you.
isn't.
Yeah.
I'm sure it will be, but I'm hoping it won't be. Living the dream of hope. So, but that bill, nothing's been passed as of yet, is my understanding. Is that correct?
Yeah,
CFO?
that's correct.
My understanding is that the regulation itself was changed by order in council to change the amount of the tax credit. What is before the legislature is the ability to actually issue the check. So the bills are already calculated based on the regulation. It's the check that's hanging in the balance waiting for legislative approval and royal assent.
So substantively, it's already gone through. This new model, is that just a little bit of process problems or how the legislative process with the check returning in, but everything else kind of remains. We know you have enough information at this point of legislative changes to be able to do the report. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so maybe we'll add that, changes and potential changes if we can. Yeah. Did you, so yes, did you want to add one more thing to that report?
Can you read the motion again?
Further, the Standing Policy Committee on Finance requested that the public service provide a report back to committee on the financial implications to the city of Winnipeg as a result of recent and proposed provincial government legislative changes to school taxes and education levies.
I'm just seeking a wording on community revitalization tax levy. I'm like just to clarify, because it's pretty general. You're not mentioning, I would say, related to the education support levy and the community revitalization levy.
And I
don't
think
know.
if we put that in, then I think that,
Then
Sorry.
30 days would be a challenge, or like, how soon do you want that one? Because that would need more time than the assessment issue, I believe.
Well, it's the same act, so, but yeah, you probably would. Whatever comes first. What is your timeline, Mr. Chair?
think
What
if
was
we
your
would,
timeline?
I was hoping 30 days.
You're hoping 30 days.
Mhm.
So, I mean, on the assessment issue, I understand that I mean, there's two support levies in the same act. We don't know what the other piece of legislation is, but we do see wording saying community revitalization that has a levy with, in addition to the education support levy that's in the Community Revitalization Tax Increment Financing Act. So I'm not sure, you know, if it takes another 30 days to come back with that piece, if all things being equal, I don't mind a staggered timeline. We're here for the long run here.
Okay, so maybe we can do that then. We'll put 30 days, report back in 30 days. And if there's any portion that is, if there's a portion of it that the CFO is able to get for us within 30 days, that's great. And we'll bring that. And then if there's a little bit further that needs another time, we recognize that as well. So we'll put 30 days on the report back.
Because it is a complex act.
Yeah.
As the former chair of the Winnipeg School Division, we exercised the component of the act that said that the minister shall report and notify. It had never been done before with respect to the properties that had been provided a community designated community revitalization property. That's a lot to report on. I appreciate that. I really do. Having exercised components of that had never been done before at the Winnipeg School Division. We wanted to see the properties and it was a requirement and it hadn't been exercised. We started getting that reporting in. Is that going to be shifted to the city? Is that, which local government is going to be receiving that report that was in that act? So that's some of the things that I'm watching for in terms of what local government will then, be responsible for elements that were defined in the act. So if we could do it on both, there are three other acts: the Municipal Act, the Charter, and the Municipal Assessment Act. So I appreciate it's a complex task in a very brief motion that we're asking. So, but really important, I think, given given that last month we did a tax increment financing. That is discussion, and the community revitalization properties. Well, I have ambitions for more, as any municipality would. So I think it's important to know, what this looks like going forward. In addition to the fact that we have sort of an outstanding TIP policy that council wanted, but I do appreciate it's complex. So I think we have a motion now.
Okay, yeah, I wonder, Mr. Clerk, if you don't mind just rereading what you've got there, please. Thank you.
Sure. And just for committee's information, with the city is required to collect school taxes under the Public Schools Act.
That's what it is.
So we're looking for a motion that reads further. Standing Policy Committee on Finance requested that the public service provide a report back within 30 days on the financial implications to the city of Winnipeg as a result of the recent and proposed provincial government legislative changes to school taxes, as well as education support and community revitalization levies.
Okay, that sounds good to me. Thank you. Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Councilor Rollins moved the motion, yeah. Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, final report here, report number 8 related to the financial implications of the city's response to COVID-19.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the monthly update on the COVID-19 financial implications to the city is included in the posted materials, and I'll touch on a few highlights. First, with respect to the financial stabilization reserve, situation is static compared to what we showed you last month. The projected balance in the reserve is still estimated to be about $49 million higher than the minimum desired level. However, the financial forecast is currently being prepared for this committee, and time will tell if the revenue is keeping pace with the budget. The written report summarizes The factors included in the 2021 budget that are COVID-19 related, such as the projected decrease in revenues and the increased cost of PPE, enhanced cleaning protocols, etc., which total over $60 million. So included in those materials is the graphical representation of the minimum threshold compared to the budget and the actual figures. And you'll also see a similar graph there picturing the liquidity situation of the city. And because of the receipt of the federal Safe Restart funding at the end of last year, liquidity is still sitting at 64% at the end of March, compared to our desired level of 30%. And the projection on that graph indicates that that buffer will continue throughout the year. With respect to specific revenues and collections, property taxes owed at the end of March were higher than March of last year by 1.9 million, which is 4% of the total accounts have balances owing that are not tip accounts. Total accounts are about 230,000. As for business taxes, the receivable at the end of March is 3.4 million, and that's $2.4 million higher than last year at this time. That's the sector that's probably having more challenges making those bill payments than the property owners. So collection efforts have started with a collaborative approach. We are trying to work with taxpayers to work on a payment program, and taxpayers have been appreciative of our tone and our approach. And just a reminder, there's over 12,000 business accounts or business tax accounts. So the accommodation taxes are being watched closely, given the travel restrictions in place. The Reserve Fund has committed disbursements to the Convention Center and Economic Development Winnipeg. However, the collections are budgeted to be $5 million this year, and we're monitoring to see if we're going to be able to reach that target. We're keeping a close eye on the balance in this fund. You can see that it looks like it's approaching zero. So if necessary, we'll bring back a motion to council if we need to do a transfer for this fund in the future. So turning to transit, ridership continues to stay below the levels that were expected during the budget preparation. Transit reports weekly statistics in the most recent week, so last week, indicated that ridership is still at a 59.73% reduction from usual, so 60%. There's a graph in this written report showing those levels, and as we recall, service levels are down 6%, and at this point, there's no plans to change that. The city continues to support the province with public health order enforcement with reimbursement for costs. The written report indicates figures to the end of February, but just so you know, I got a more recent update at the end of March. We did over 6,200 inspections, and year to date, we had 12 warnings with 9 non-compliant inspections, and we have billed the province $168,000 for that service to the end of March. And then finally, turning to the 2 grant programs established by council to assist with pandemic recovery. The applications under the Economic Support Grant Program continue to be processed. We have less than 500 to go. To the end of last week, we've actually issued or approved 1,622, which is 81% of the fund, and we continue to work through those applications. For the Wellness Grant Program, 193 grants were paid to the end of March, totaling $515,000, or an additional 4 were approved most recently in April, so now we're up to 88% of that $600,000 fund being granted. So in conclusion, Public Service is monitoring the financial impacts and paying heed to the potential implications of changes to public health orders. The cash management plan presented in 2020 is ready to go again if we need it. And if you recall, that included last time moratoriums on interest penalties for property taxes and other things, cuts to discretionary spending, deferrals of fleet purchases, potential reserve transfers, etc., looking at cash to capital. So all those levers are ready to go if we need them, but we're continuing to monitor the situation. That's my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions on this at all? Okay, maybe just 2 comments. I know it's 3-4 months into 2021, but I want to acknowledge again, Councilors Orlikow and Rollins, who really spearheaded the Wellness Grant Program. I mean, that was kind of a lot of work, primarily led by you 2 colleagues, and it was very well received, I think, and community members really appreciated that investment of $600,000 to kind of try to help offset or deal with some of the emotional physical, spiritual impacts almost too of the pandemic through the winter months. So thank you once again. It's obviously by the fact that $515,000 was approved, it indicates certainly there was a big uptake in that. So I want to acknowledge that again. And second of all, I'm glad you mentioned the cash flow management plan. That was a very important tool, a critical tool for the city of Winnipeg through 2020 to deal with COVID. At the end of 2020, as part of the budget process, with the federal government's help, with their funding, we reset the levers in the cash flow management plan. It's very important that be ready to go if needed, and those levers needed again. We hope we don't have to utilize that plan and all the levers in the way we did last year, but we need to make sure, as far as good, cash flow management, that those levers are available and that cash flow management plan is set to go. And so I'm glad to know it's kind of been reset and it's available if need be. So that's important. Okay, a motion to receive this, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Schreier. Motion. Is that your motion, Councillor Schreier?
No, you were making comments. I thought it was an appropriate time to make
Oh,
comments.
yes. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
And thank you, Councillor Gillingham, and thank you to Councillors Rollins and Orlico for their involvement in terms of how we've allocated the wellness fund in the city, the wellness grant program. 40,000 in my ward happens to be exactly how much I saved from my ward allowance in my first term, that which I was allowed to spend on things like this, and I didn't. But that was my prerogative in this case. My prerogative, sort of my obligation in this case, is to spend the 40,000. So it's a little different. I just want to make the point in terms of if you just take a look at the economics of these types of programs, for the most part, they're programs that are rather cheap compared to, let's say, the ward budgets that increase for the councillors, for the wards that tend to be construction oriented, because we don't do anything about that. Construction, just inflation goes on unabated. There's no accounting for it today, what the precise factors were in terms of the inflation that's caused the 15 to 20% inflation rate on a project we discussed today. In these cases, when we're talking about giving small amounts of money to people in the area, and they provide programs for people in the area. Some of them are construction oriented, but very few. And let me tell you the efficiency in this. Remember, in the last 30 years, per dollar, construction has become 10 times less efficient.
I don't know that there were, Councillor, I don't know that there were any construction-related projects that were funded through the wellness grant.
That's my point, Councillor Gillingham, and that's what I'm talking about. This is not very much a construction-oriented program. However, there were applications, I know in my ward, to create, let's say, tables or something outside of a high school, so people could have their meetings outside in a COVID-safe environment. So there were those types of constructions, but I don't think there are many. If I take a look at it now, given the cost of how much lumber has gone up in the last year, it's that's another discussion, but something that we just can't trivialize by ignoring by any means. But my point is, programs like this are incredibly efficient compared to what's happened in the construction industry. Again, I'll just say it one more time. Per dollar, construction has become 10 times less efficient than when it comes to other types of programs that we provide. And that was expressed, I would say, very much in this wellness grant program, where people were helping people in their own ward, in their own community, and it's wonderful.
Thank you very much. Before we go, one final, we had a kind of a dump of snow, and I did ask our CFO if she would have any indication. I know our public works staff and the contractors were out clearing snow. I did ask her in advance of the meeting if she could be prepared to tell us about costs related to snow clearing last week, I guess it was.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. So typically my understanding is from Public Works that it typically costs about $4 million to clear snow, but last week they did what they called spot plowing and more sanding. So it's probably going to cost around $2 million. Okay. They don't know the exact, but that's their estimate.
Okay, good. Thank you. Snow always fascinates me. The amount of money cities spend, municipalities spend across Canada to deal with something that melts away if you just wait long enough. It's quite remarkable. But anyways, we don't have that luxury. So, okay, thank you. Entertain a motion then to receive this report, report number 8 is information. Thank you, Councillor Rollins. All in favor, aye. Thank you. Motion to adjourn, Councillor Schreier. So moved. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.